This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. It's very difficult to, and I can't even do it justice, to summarize. I hate that word. The end of life of 4 individuals. And for our purposes on this episode and the previous episode of Body Bags, we have split these episodes in 2. So today we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to talk about Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin and what they went through in their final moments in this life. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, we really walked down quite the gruesome path in our last episode of Body Bags. And, you know, I got to tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. None of this is. I think that we've probably always known that it was not going to be for the faint of heart. I got to tell you, I did not, even in my experience, Dave, I did not anticipate the level of violence that we've been discussing. A part of me thinks that I was hoping that it wasn't going to be to this degree, because we've spent so much time going over this case and discussing this case for all these years. And then when this information finally drops, you realize the scope of everything that these kids went through. And I think about Kaylee and the level of trauma that she endured. I got to tell you, Xana is equal to that. And I don't know, there's really no equality here, perhaps. Right. It's just how over the top these injuries are. And it says a lot about the person that perpetrated these crimes and is, again, convicted of them.
When we were talking about the Gonzalez family yesterday during a lot of the recording and on and off air, we've talked about this case a lot. And the one thing that you and I, in covering stories for so many years, you tend to see families of the victims. Yeah. Some are just taken aback where they can't even speak. They're so emotional, or the opposite, so shut down that they can't speak. But in this one, from the very beginning, from early on, the Gonzalez family was very, very harsh. Not in just their wording, but they were very upfront, very in your face. And now we know why. I think a lot of us assumed that they had a lot more information than we did, which they did. And that's why they were given a wide berth, to say what they wanted to say. But Steve Gonzalez in particular did dial himself back a little bit. He didn't volunteer everything they knew. But it was just, I now understand why he felt the way that he did. And I will tell you, my heart hurts for all of the family members, because no matter how they handle it, it's better than me. That's all I keep thinking, Joe. Yeah. Based on what you and I have found out over the last few days of what happened with these young people, every family, whether they were quiet and reserved or loud and holding meetings, they all did it better than me. I don't think I would have emotionally, psychologically survived the knowledge that these families have of what happened to their loved one.
Yeah, that's the tough thing. And, that I think that kind of brings us to Xana in maybe kind of a circuitous way. I think she, out of all of the victims, we knew not quite as much about her family background. And to say that she had come from kind of a tough raising, I think is maybe an understatement. And not that not that there are degrees to tragedy, because everything is tragic in its own way. Her death is tragic in its own unique way, because she is literally one of these kids that's kind of pulled herself up just through sheer will, that hardcore will. And, I've had kids like her, over the course of my academic career, where they are determined that they're going to do better, that they are going to set their faces like flint collectively and individually, and they are just going to push on through no matter what. And I think Xana epitomized that. And what was, again, kind of very poignant about this is, I think that with Ethan, and again, I'm kind of superimposing what I believe here. I think that with Ethan, she saw like this great family, that she could potentially be a part of, and that stability. A lot of kids that come from homes that don't necessarily have that kind of support, they long for that. They long for that stability.
To give you an idea of who we are dealing with in her family, Joe.
Yeah,
Ann Taylor, the attorney for the murderer, actually represented Xana Kernodle's mother in a drug-related incident. She was actually the attorney of record for Xana Kernodle's mom. And when this case came along and she saw the opportunity to get a lot of publicity, she moved everything aside so that she could become appointed, to be the public defender for the Kohberger case. Sorry, I used his name, but that's the reality here. So Ann Taylor actually defended Xana Kernodle's mother before she got that out of the way and became the attorney for the person who killed her client's daughter. Think about that for just a minute. And it also explains the kind of background Xana grew up in. That's her mom. Not knocking anyone, but her dad didn't do anybody any favors by what he did during the his impact statement, because it was meandering and it was all about him, what he was going to miss, And I get that. Look, I've said it before, Joe. I don't know how I would have acted in that situation. I understand how I could have been any one of them, given the moment. Yeah. But it's not something easy to speak in front of an audience, a crowd that you've never met, in front of a judge in a courtroom in a foreign place, and actually be articulate, and make sense, because you're heartbroken. You have been stomped on, and I don't know how you get out of bed in the morning. So hats off to all of them. But you're right to identify Xana as the victim of this situation, who had really done well. We mentioned before, Joe, these young people were students in college, and they were all good students.
Yeah.
Everyone, that's such a rare thing. It's just not the norm. It as a professor and as a parent. We both know it.
Yeah. And these kids were all, I think Ethan was still early in his career, but I have no doubt that he would have completed. All of these kids were tracking toward graduation. And, listen, say what you will, that's the exception as opposed to the norm.
Right.
Most people that start college, if you look at them in total, that's not generally going to happen. Most people will fall by the wayside. They might come back and pick up college later, but all of these young people were tracking toward graduation. One had already moved out and was done with all of the requirements and everything.
Finished early.
Yeah, and finished early. So you look at that and you think, wow, what are the odds that this group of young people would all come together? Maybe that was one of the core elements that drew them all together. And I can never get past that image that was taken the day before, the group image of all of these kids together. I think that was actually taken at an adjacent property. I was always under the impression it was taken there on property, the outdoor shot of them, but I had heard that was taken at an adjacent property.
Wow.
But yeah, with Xana in particular, there's she's been kind of a touchstone throughout this. We've got Maddie and Kaylee isolated. We talked about that extensively, and Kaylee in particular, trapped, I think was the word that her daddy used, trapped in that bed and in that room. But Xana was, of course, free in this. She moved about. We don't really know what it was that drew her attention, Dave, but her story in and of itself, kind of her little life, kind of weaves itself all the way through everything from her being up, active on her phone, food order, collecting the food, and then what did she hear that drew her attention up this adjacent stairwell? I don't know that mystery will ever be completely solved. I don't know that that's possible, but I think that we kind of have an idea. Would you agree with that statement, man?
Well, yeah, we have, based on what we now know from the police interviews early on, we know that Dylan Mortensen, that she heard Kaylee scream, "Somebody is in the house."
Yeah.
Now, we know that Dylan heard what it sounded to her as a scuffle that she thought might be Kaylee playing with her dog.
Yep.
But then she heard a loud thud and then muffled noises, I guess is the better way to put that. But based on what Dylan told police in the hours after this happened, recounting what it appears to be, and based on what Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, said, that Xana heard what was going on as well. She was awake. Ethan was crashed out. They came in. Ethan crashed. They'd been in a couple hours. Xana was up. She was on her phone. She placed the order from Jack in the Box. It was delivered. And she's got her food. So she's awake, hearing something going on that is not normal for her to hear. And after, Dylan heard the scream, somebody's in the house, Xana probably went, "Who's in the house? What the heck?" And so she went to go look. Whereas Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk, said they stayed, put. Dylan in particular said she was mortified and scared and stayed in her room. She poked her head out 3 different times. But Xana, it appears, might have actually gone up the stairs to the 3rd floor to find out what was going on. And based on timing, sounds, it appears that she came in contact with her killer on those stairs.
Yeah, and then the chase was on at this point in time. Because when you think of, okay, let's just look at it this way. And I think everybody that is listening to us right now can identify with the idea of hearing a sound in our home at night. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And you get up out of bed and you go inspect it, or, with Kim laying right next to me, who is a light sleeper, I get the elbow. Did you hear that? And then you arise. I'm not going to get my wife to go. You arise, and and so anytime I arise out of the bed, I'm going to be accompanied by my little friend, who shall go unmentioned, that I keep with me at all times, to inspect the area. She didn't have that advantage. And when you go to inspect your house, you don't really, I think your hair standing up, maybe on the back of your neck. I think that's, the primal response, that kind of tingling feeling that you get. And then you confirm, most people confirm that it was nothing. Okay. However, there are those moments in time where you come face to face with Satan, which in Xana's case, I think that's what happened. I agree. She goes, and here's the other thing. If she hears whimpering or hears kind of a muffled sound, let's reflect back to what we talked about in the previous episode, where you've got life leaving the bodies of these two young women. If they're not deceased at that point in time, if there's any kind of sound, I talked about yesterday about expirating blood. You would have coughing. You may have someone that, if they're capable of those last few moments with a death rattle, or they're experiencing pain, they're moaning or something like this, there's still that remnant that's there. Maybe it caught her ear at that point in time. And as she ascends this staircase, he's now descending the staircase, removing himself from this environment, which, here's the thing. I'm wondering, in the perpetrator's mind here, if this individual if he's capable of this, if he's having this indwelling fear, kind of fight, flight kind of thing that's going on after he's kind of loosed himself in this frenzy that he has, whatever the motivation is, hatred, anger, sex, maybe a combination of all three. He thinks he's free and clear. He didn't expect to find two people. He found one. I mean, he expected maybe to find one, found two. Who knows? And he's already heightened. He's already spent. And then all of a sudden you get this other burst of adrenaline on his part. You're confronting somebody on these darkened stairs. You know that they're in front of you. You know what you've just done upstairs. You've got to put as much distance between those people up there and that person that's standing before you at this time. Well, it's at that moment in time that the attack begins, or at least the pursuit begins. We know that Xana is found on the floor of her bedroom. He's chased her in here and has assaulted her, Dave. And again, we're faced with the proposition of this wounding that has taken place, these injuries, which again are almost too unimaginable for any of us to comprehend. I don't know that anyone can appreciate the fear. When I was little, I used to have this reoccurring dream that I was being chased, and that everything around me was on fire, and that there were these fire people chasing me. Now, I don't know how you dissect that dream. I don't know what goes into it. I'm sure that there's some deep-seated pathology there. It wouldn't surprise me on my part. And it was a dream that I had into my 20s. It was like a reoccurring dream. For a moment, Xana had something like that. But Dave, I think that she had an awareness, because obviously she's awake. This is no dream. It's like that line from Rosemary's Baby, where Mia Farrow says, "This isn't a dream. This is really happening." For those of you that are not familiar with that book or that movie, horrible, horrible story, but it's something that you cannot necessarily wrap your brain around. And for those moments, that would have been in her last moments. She's trying to flee from this individual and get away. After he has kind of entered into her room, Dave, all hell breaks loose. And it is directed at her.
Sergeant Shane Gunderson actually wrote in his report about what took place in the room, in Xana's room. He actually noted that they could tell a fierce struggle took place in that room. And so if you're the way I'm thinking this took place between Kaylee screaming, somebody's in the house. Xana goes upstairs to see what's going on. Her boyfriend is in her bed, crashed out. I'm guessing Kohberger, the killer, meets her on the stairs. I'm picturing her timidly listening to see what's going on. And he comes out and sees her, and she takes off to try to get to her room. And he's in like you mentioned, probably was not expecting anything to stop him. Everybody's going to be asleep. I'm going to get in there and get out, and I'm going to leave this mayhem. I'm going to leave horror behind. But instead, he ends up having to get into a real fight with Maddie and Kaylee, and he comes down the stairs and he sees Xana, and she's taken off trying to get back to the safety of her room, thinking I can shut the door and lock it and start screaming. She never makes it. He gets her, and I would like to know more about what took place in that hallway, because we know that she didn't make it all the way into her room. We know that where her body was, was inside.
I would love to talk to like an endocrinologist sometime to try to understand this idea of adrenaline dumps, where, you've got an individual that is like, they are, in this case, this monster has perpetrated this crime. That's one adrenaline dump that you have going on in that moment. And then all of a sudden, maybe it begins, you have this conscious awareness that you need to leave. Then all of a sudden you get another dump when you come face to face with an eyewitness at that point in time. You track her down into the room. And Dave, you remember what I was saying yesterday about Kaylee. We had one report per the police that came out that said that she had 20 sharp force injuries. Mr. Gonzalez said that it was upwards of 30. Okay. Dave, I got to tell you, I know that we're not necessarily comparing numbers, but please tell me the number with Xana. I mean, that we're looking at right now. It's
50.
It's staggering.
50 mostly defensive wounds. Now, the way it has been the way it has been written down by police was that a massive struggle took place, a fight is breaking out, and yet Xana Kernodle did not go without putting up a fight. She fought long and hard, and I don't know, again, a minute probably feels like an hour when you're in this kind of a battle for your life. She was in a life and death struggle with the devil. 50 stab wounds, arms, defensive wounds. One of them was described as grabbing the knife.
Yeah. And
I can't imagine, Joe. We see this in movies and things like that where somebody in desperation grabs the knife, but she has that wound on her hand and she grabbed a blade.
Did you know that I don't know if you remember this. We've been doing this for so long now. Did you know that for me, at least, we had been hearing sharp force injuries, stab wounds, that sort of thing, but it was very generalized and broad. Okay. Do you recall that descriptor of Xana was actually the first bit of specific injury data that was leaked out? And the reason I remember it is that whoever originally released that information, and I can't recall who it was, they referred to tendons at that point in time, the tendons in the hand. Right. And it doesn't surprise me at all, because grabbing this blade and having the blade actually drawn through the hand forcefully is not surprising. We go back to Kaylee that had these blocking injuries. I talked about these. I use the term parry, which is a term that's used in knife fighting and sword fighting. It's a defensive move where you raise your arm. It would seem to me that some of these injuries would have been similar in that sense. But when you're talking about 50, and this number is being utilized or used rather to describe her injuries, they're going to come in multiple presentations on her body. Obviously, you have to have specific injuries that are going to end her life. But let's just think about these defensive injuries just for a second. They were very specific on her left hand, and I would not that your hand dependency really comes into play so much in a circumstance like this when you're fighting for your life. I'd really like to know if Xana was left-handed or right-handed, because one of these really ghastly injuries that she sustained notes that it was between the left index finger and her thumb. So if you imagine just grasping something, anything, a soda can, a pen, or whatever it is you want to pretend with, you grasp this, and that kind of webbing, the webbing that we have that extends through, between your index finger and your thumb, that would have been sliced all the way through. And I would imagine that there are probably going to be several that are similar to that over the surfaces of her body, because when you think about 50, Dave, there's only so many places that you can go, and she's a tiny young lady. You can look at her images and tell this. She doesn't have a lot of surface area, so she's going to have them in anatomically oriented in multiple locations, I think, at least. She's also been, and I think that this is indicative of trying to get her to submit. Again, this goes to how violent this attack was. She's got multiple blunt force trauma as well. Just think about if you've ever seen a fight where you've got an individual that's trying to get someone under control, and they begin to punch them. The punching, I think, comes about to kind of disorient them so you can accomplish the task. In this case, the task was to end her life. There was no way she was going to get out of these circumstances, Dave, at all. So you're going to have this individual, this perpetrator, this lizard, striking her multiple times. I also believe that he is probably holding the knife as he's doing this, and the knife is being used as a bludgeon. I submit to you that probably the end of the knife, and I'm not talking about the business end with the tip of the blade, I'm talking about the handle is being used to hammer away. I was talking to some folks just last night, Dave, about the utility of the K-bar knife, okay? And did you know that with the K-bar, it's such a robust weapon that when the Marine Corps created it, it has multiple utility. This blade is so robust and resilient that you can actually open crates of ammo with it. So just think in the South Pacific, you've got these little wooden crates that ammo comes in, or chow comes in, food, whatever it is. You can take this blade and stick it between the lid and the rest of the framework of these wooden crates and pop this thing open. Also, you can flip the knife around, and the rounded butt of the handle can be used as a hammer, Dave. So you're striking down, and if you look at the end of a K-bar knife on the handle portion of it, it actually looks like the head of a hammer. And so it would not surprise me if the knife had been utilized this way during these attacks. This is where you're getting these grotesque blunt force trauma from that these victims are being subjected to.
The one thing that I was trying to gather in my thoughts, because I'm a visual person, I can, and I'm picturing, which is why it bothered me they tore the house down. And because I wanted to know. I wanted to be able to count the steps. I wanted to know, where did Xana actually come in contact with her killer? And was she hoping beyond all hope that Ethan would wake up? That she's getting to the room, because the fact that she was found in the middle of the room on the floor, she's not on the bed, she's not pushed against. So she stood there and fought her killer right there. you mentioned she was a slight woman. Kohberger, he's 6 foot tall. I mean, he's going to be stronger than her. Yeah. And you would have thought he would have been able to push her against a wall in the effort of killing, but she fought in the middle of that room where she died. And what we do know from those defensive wounds is that she didn't go quickly. She didn't go quietly. And we know that Dylan Mortensen said that she heard a male voice she didn't recognize, basically saying, "I'm here to help. Right. I got you. Don't worry." Calming her down so that she didn't speak, I guess. And what we know of Xana from that moment, she was the only one that truly was awake and engaged as this took place. We mentioned
fully engaged, brother, all the way through. The one thing about it is that these kids were brutalized in such a way that, and I find this quite remarkable. I'd love to know what you think about this. With Kaylee and Maddie, they both sustained injuries to their chest, to the organs of the chest. Okay. So the lungs in particular, with them, the left lung. With Xana, she actually sustained a laceration to her right lung, as well as 2 lacerations to her heart. Okay. Again, this individual is in a dominant position over them. And here's the real thing, man. Here's the real thing. They would have been literally face to face with him. Face to face. This guy, even through that darkness, that desperate darkness in there, he is the only thing they see. Let that settle down into everyone's groundwater just for a second. The last thing that your eyes behold before you step off into eternity, is this reptile. A big mystery, I think, in everything with this case is Ethan. What happened to Ethan? We've heard quite a bit. Let me just throw some things out to you that came across my desk. This doesn't mean they're valid, okay? And you never know, and this just goes to show you never know what's floating about out there and these conclusions that people draw. Did you know at one point in time, there was a story that was floating about that talked about how Ethan, how did it go? Ethan was found on the floor of the bedroom and his throat had been cut as if out of a slasher movie. Where the blade was, drawn across the neck, those sorts of things, and he essentially fell right there. Well, I got to tell you, Dave, everything that we've heard, the information that we do have about Ethan, doesn't validate that in any way. When you begin to think about the position that he was found in, and what we do know is that he was in the bed. All right. He was in Xana's bed. This is her room. He was spending the night there. And that's really all we know. And we haven't had a lot of comment from his family because the family was not there to deliver a victim impact statement. And look, they made that choice. They felt like that. And I think, and I'm getting this accurate, that they felt as though they wanted to honor him by going out on their boat that day. And it brings me back to an image that I saw that has been thrown around quite a bit. And you can see this image of, it's a sweet, sweet picture. And it's a picture of Ethan and Xana on a boat together. And as you well know, I love my boat, and I spend as much possible time as I can on that boat with my bride. And it is our happy place. And I hope that they were happy at that moment in time, as sad as that day was. But we haven't had them making statements specifically about Ethan's injuries. But what we do know is that he's obviously found in the bed. He sustained pretty significant trauma relative to this individual who has now confessed to killing him, Dave, and has now been, convicted and is now thrown into a deep, dark hole. But we do finally have a mystery solved here. And this just came to mind, Dave. It has been confirmed that image that was foisted upon us for so long of the quote unquote blood dripping out of the house,
which I thought was fake, by the way.
Yeah. You told me that. And let me tell you something. I defy anybody to go back and find any statement or written statement or vocalized statement, image, anything of me saying that that's blood. I never said that, and I never have. And the reason I didn't is because I know better than to do that. No person involved in forensics worth their salt would call that blood. There's a whole, most people are not aware. We might see things at a scene, okay, and it might look like blood to us, but we will not say that it is in fact blood. We can't even comment like in an official report that that this looks like blood. You can say maybe a blood-like substance until you can actually scientifically confirm it. And can I run down this list for you real quick? I won't belabor the point, but first off, we have to identify, and this is the way this works, we have to identify that the substance is blood. And if blood, we have to identify if it's animal blood or human blood. Then the next step is to confirm if it is human blood, and this is the way it used to work, what blood type is it? So you've got your ABO groupings. Then from there, you can pull information from that sample and get a DNA profile on it. And we have come to find out now that they have identified, and this is per the police, that blood that seeped down that foundational wall, it looks like cinder block to me, that exterior wall that they keep showing over and over again, that it was blood, and that this blood actually belonged to Ethan, Dave. Yep.
I was shocked to hear that was the truth. And the reason is it didn't seem likely. It seemed like something that would have happened as a gag on Halloween. Yep. And the one thing I have learned in doing things with you over the years is you don't even mention if something looks like a bullet wound. Somebody is shot and you see where the hole is for the bullet. You don't call it a bullet wound. You call it something other than that. A defect. Yeah. I'm like, well, and the same thing is true here. Seeing that picture of blood, I thought it was going to be something else, but it really was Ethan's blood. And now that we know that Ethan was in the bed, asleep, they'd been at a frat party earlier, got home 2-ish. He's crashed, sound asleep when Xana orders the food from Jack in the Box. And with everything going on with Xana, hearing the upstairs, activity, hearing a scream, Ethan's sleeping through all of that apparently. But his injuries actually kind of make me understand why there was blood coming out the side of that on the outside wall, because we've got now. I don't know exactly how many times he was stabbed, but I know it was at least once. Because that was the original thing, was that he was stabbed and it got his jugular vein, and that was it. Now, when I looked at
let me back up here just for a second.
Yeah.
It did get his jugular vein, but it's also clipped his subclave vein, which is different than the jugular, and it also got his subclavicular artery as well. And thank you, by the way, you sent me a text last night. You sent me a text last night. Clenny was the case that we were referring to. Courtney Clenny, that threw the knife that killed that young man. She claimed that she threw the knife, which, if you're selling it, I ain't buying it.
And that's why. And Joe, just so that we're clear here, when we did the, the model thing, OnlyFans, about Courtney Clenny and her claim that, she just threw this steak knife and it just happened to hit him right there. I had no idea that was a dangerous spot to hit somebody. It seemed like actually a pretty innocuous spot. But when you actually were breaking that down, when I saw this where it mentioned subclavian vein, subclavian artery, and jugular vein, my first thought is, okay, we're all going to know jugular vein. We've all heard that. Yeah. These other ones, I don't know. So is this something that could be done with one knife wound? Could one knife wound get all of this?
I suppose that it could. And they're very nonspecific in their listing of these injuries, because you're going to have this complex of vessels that run through this area. Could you get subclave artery, the subclave vein, and the jugular vein all in one stab wound? I think that you probably could. I think that would probably be improbable. They're kind of bundled all together. We don't know if it's multiple stab wounds, because they're not really talking about that at this point. And I anticipate. Here's something else that I'm kind of very interested in. Is going to be the blood pattern deposition on this, and here's why. Because if we believe what they're saying, that he was awake and that he never moved from that position, he was killed where he lay. If they clipped an artery there, and to a vein to a lesser degree, particularly that subclave artery, Dave, you're going to have a tremendous amount of force coming through there. And you've heard this term of arterial spray, where the spray of the blood, as it's pouring out, it comes out with such force, you'll get this almost histamine-like deposition on surrounding surfaces. Here's another thing. I have to think that he did lay in one position for a protracted period of time as he bled out, because you're getting enough blood here that it would have to seep, and again, this is based upon what they're saying, seep off of the edge of the bed or through the bed, then adjacent to the wall, go past the flooring, the subflooring, and then wind up presenting itself on the exterior of the house, Dave. Just let that sink in. A lot of that, just that external view that you have of the blood, that's on that those foundational blocks, is kind of interesting to me, because it's through that. If you go back and you think, okay, he laid in one spot, that gives you an idea as to where that bed is positioned in that room that this would have poured through or poured adjacent to, which is a big reveal here, I think. They're not saying anything about defensive wounds. And here's another thing that they don't say anything about that we've heard. This so-called carving on the leg. And I don't know where that initially came from. Maybe it does exist. It wasn't stated in this document dump to this point. I'd be fascinated as to know what the origin of that source information was.
I think about the will to live. And I think about his smugness to not even really show any kind of emotion or anything else. It's like, kind of like Haley Gonzalez, one of her relatives, I think it was her little sister, that passed along an idea that you might have gotten big A's in school.
Yeah.
Going to get big D's in prison.
There you go.
And,
yeah.
You know, there is no justice for what he did. You know, I think but I look at these wounds and I think about my own daughters. I can't get that out of my head. I think of what he did to them.
I don't think any of us can, Dave. I don't think the nation can. Because, now at least we've had a peek, if you will, behind the curtain as to the devastation that took place on that November night in 2022, those years ago now. We're in 2025 now. It'll almost be 3 years. Justice, such as it is, has been some time coming. It has arrived. I don't know to what degree of satisfaction, and it doesn't really matter what I think about it. What I hope for, though, at the end of all of this, is that we take the lessons that can be learned from these horrific circumstances and apply them so that it doesn't happen again. And those lessons come in all forms. They come in all forms, everything from personal security to the individuals we are surrounded by. And I think to those people that support us, we need to embrace those people. We need to love those people that are in our lives. For those moments, those fleeting moments that we have in life, life is, in fact, very, very short, folks. Most people don't understand that. And when you are in the bloom of youth, it seems as though that it will go on forever and ever. But for these 4 lives that have been lost now, we can't say too much more other than they're gone. And hopefully, along the way, their absence will be replaced by some measure of peace in the hearts and minds of their families. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.